There is a quiet question that follows you everywhere. It waits beside your bed before sunrise. It walks with you through crowded streets. It sits silently across from you while you drink your evening tea. The question is never spoken aloud. It simply whispers, "When will my real life begin?" Perhaps you imagine it is waiting just beyond one achievement, one promotion, one relationship, one perfect morning when your mind finally becomes quiet. You tell yourself that once those pieces fall into place, you will finally relax. You will finally breathe without feeling guilty. You will finally become the person you have been trying so hard to be. Until then, life feels like a hallway, a long hallway filled with closed doors, and every day becomes another walk toward a room you never seem to reach. Tonight, imagine you are far away from all of it. The city has disappeared behind distant mountains. There are no glowing screens, no clocks, no notifications asking for another piece of your attention. Only a small fire burns beside a slow river. Its light dances across smooth stones. Above you, thousands of stars hang in complete silence as if they have been waiting for someone to notice them. You sit beside the water. The river does not hurry. The stars do not compete. The fire does not struggle to become brighter than the moon. Everything simply exists. And somewhere in that stillness, an old voice begins to speak, not loudly, but gently enough that it almost sounds like the wind moving through bamboo. It says, "You have mistaken waiting for living." The words settle into the night, not as a judgment, as an invitation. Because perhaps the greatest tragedy is not that life is difficult, it is that so many people postpone it. You may recognize this feeling more than you realize. You finish one goal and immediately invent another. You lose 5 kilograms, then decide 10 more will finally make you happy. You earn enough money to feel safe, then discover a new number that promises even greater peace. You finally have a free weekend, but instead of resting, your mind begins planning Monday before Saturday has even begun. The destination keeps moving, like chasing the horizon. The closer you walk, the farther it appears. An old traveler once crossed a vast desert searching for an oasis that everyone described as paradise. For weeks he followed stories told by strangers. "Keep walking," they said. "It is just beyond the next dune." Every sunrise filled him with hope. Every sunset left him exhausted. One evening, too tired to continue, he collapsed beside a lonely palm tree. He expected disappointment. Instead, for the first time in weeks, he noticed something extraordinary. Birds were singing. Cool water flowed beneath the sand. Wild flowers had quietly grown around the roots of the tree. He had been resting inside an oasis without realizing it. His suffering had not come from the desert. It came from believing paradise had to exist somewhere else. Perhaps your own life is more like that desert than you think. How many beautiful moments have passed unnoticed because they were not the moments you were waiting for? A child laughing in another room, rain striking the window, the smell of warm bread, your mother's voice becoming softer as she grows older. The last evening your closest friend lived in the same city. Most precious things never announce themselves. They arrive quietly, and they leave the same way. The ancient sages often watched ordinary things more carefully than extraordinary ones. They studied rivers instead of kings, trees instead of empires, clouds instead of monuments, because nature reveals something human beings constantly forget. Nothing blooms all year, not even the cherry blossom. Its beauty exists precisely because it knows how to arrive and how to leave. Yet you ask yourself to remain endlessly productive, endlessly inspired, endlessly certain. You ask from yourself what even spring does not ask from the earth. There is a small village hidden between mist-covered mountains. In the center of the village grows an enormous persimmon tree. Every autumn, children gather beneath its branches, waiting for fruit to fall. The youngest children cannot understand why the elders never shake the trunk. It would be faster, they insist. The old gardener simply smiles. If you pull the fruit before its time, he says, you do not receive autumn, you receive bitterness. The children learn slowly. Some lessons require seasons. As adults, we laugh at impatient children, but are we truly different? We shake the tree of life every day. We force conversations that need silence. We chase love that asks for patience. We demand clarity from futures that have not yet been born. Then we wonder why everything tastes unfinished. The world teaches speed. The river teaches timing. There is a difference. Look closely at water. When it reaches a stone, it does not become angry. It does not argue. It does not announce that the obstacle has ruined its plans. It simply curves. Hours become days. Days become years. Eventually, the hardest rock begins carrying the signature of something infinitely softer. Not because water forced its way, because it remained faithful to its nature. Some victories can only belong to gentleness. You were taught another language, a language of pressure. Push harder, wake earlier, optimize everything. Turn every hobby into income. Measure every hour. Improve every weakness. There is wisdom in discipline, but there is danger in believing your worth depends upon constant effort. Imagine holding a handful of sand. Close your fingers tightly. What happens? The harder you grip, the faster the grains escape. Now open your hand, the sand remains. Life often behaves the same way. The things we cling to most desperately become the things we fear losing most deeply. Peace, love, success, time, control. Perhaps that is why the old philosophers spoke so often about open hands instead of closed fists. Not because they rejected ambition, because they understood the strange mathematics of existence. Some things grow only in loosened soil. A farmer cannot command wheat to appear. He prepares the earth. He waters faithfully. He removes weeds. Then he waits. Waiting is not laziness. It is participation in a rhythm larger than yourself. This is difficult for the modern heart. You have been rewarded for urgency. Messages arrive instantly. Food appears within minutes. Entire worlds fit inside your pocket. Gradually, patience begins to feel like failure. If something takes years, you assume something is wrong. Yet the greatest transformations have always ignored human deadlines. Mountains rise millimeter by millimeter. Forests become ancient one silent season at a time. The moon never rushes toward fullness. Still, every month it arrives. There is an old story about a sculptor who wanted to carve the perfect dragon. He spent decades searching for flawless stone. Whenever he found a block with even the smallest crack, he rejected it. Years passed. His workshop remained empty. One day, an elderly mason visited him. Without saying much, the mason picked up a cracked piece of granite lying outside. He began carving. The sculptor protested. "It is imperfect." The mason nodded. "So are dragons." By sunset, a magnificent dragon emerged, not despite the crack, but because of it. The fracture had become the creature's flowing spine. The sculptor wept. He realized he had not been waiting for perfect stone. He had been waiting for permission to begin. How much of your own life rests unopened because you are waiting for perfection? The perfect body before enjoying photographs. The perfect partner before feeling complete. The perfect income before traveling. The perfect confidence before creating. Meanwhile, years move quietly like snow melting on distant peaks. Time rarely steals life dramatically. It steals it invisibly, one postponed afternoon at a time. Listen carefully to your own thoughts. How often do they begin with these words? When I finally move, when I finally heal, when I finally succeed, when I finally become enough. Those 4 words build invisible prisons because they place life somewhere your feet are not. The present becomes merely preparation. But preparation for what? Another present, always another one. A wise boatman ferried travelers across a mountain lake every evening. One young merchant grew impatient during the journey. "Can you row faster?" he asked. "I have important plans waiting on the other shore." The boatman continued at exactly the same pace. The merchant became frustrated. "You're wasting my time." The old man looked across the still water. Then he asked softly, "Which shore is your life happening on?" The merchant had no answer. "Perhaps neither do we, because while your body occupies today, your imagination often lives somewhere else. Half in yesterday, half in tomorrow, rarely here, rarely now." The fire beside the river has grown smaller. Its warmth remains. Mist begins floating above the water like wandering spirits. You notice something unexpected. The river has been making the same gentle sound this entire time. It never asked you to notice. It simply continued flowing. Maybe peace is less like discovering something new. Maybe it is remembering what has been quietly present all along. Your breathing, the night air, the steady rhythm of your own heartbeat. None of them demanded applause, they only asked for attention. Lao Tzu once hinted that the way cannot be grasped by chasing it. The moment you try to possess it, it slips beyond your reach, like trying to hold moonlight inside your hands. Yet if you simply sit beside the river, the moon reflects itself without effort. This is the first doorway, not the end of anxiety, not the end of ambition, something gentler, the possibility that your life has already begun, even here, even before everything is solved, even while questions remain unanswered. The stars continue their silent journey overhead. The fire settles into glowing embers. Across the river, the darkness deepens. And with it comes another question, one far more unsettling than the first. If life is already here, why does waiting hurt so much? The river offers no reply, only its endless, patient song as the night slowly carries you toward the next part of the journey. The river keeps moving through the darkness. Its surface reflects fragments of stars but never tries to hold them. Each reflection appears for a moment, then disappears without resistance. Watching it, you begin to wonder whether anxiety is born in exactly the opposite way, not from what is happening but from what refuses to leave your mind. The old voice beside the fire speaks again. "Tell me," it asks, "how much of your life have you spent arriving somewhere that only existed in your imagination?" You do not answer, because you already know. There were nights when sleep never came. Not because anything terrible had happened, but because tomorrow kept rehearsing itself inside your head. Conversations that had not occurred, failures that had not arrived, judgments that belonged to strangers you had never met. Your body remained in bed. Your mind wandered into a future that did not exist. And somehow, the imagined future became powerful enough to steal the only real moment you possessed. This is the peculiar nature of waiting. It rarely looks like standing still. It looks like constant movement inside an unmoving body. Imagine a young archer living in a valley surrounded by cedar forests. Every morning he climbed the same hill to practice. His arrows were swift. His posture was perfect. Yet the closer an important tournament approached, the worse he became. His hands trembled. His breathing shortened. The target seemed smaller every day. Desperate, he sought advice from an elderly hermit who lived near the mountain spring. The hermit did something unexpected. He placed a wooden bowl into the stream. "Hit it," he said. The bowl drifted slowly with the current. The archer laughed. "It keeps moving." The old man nodded. "So does life." The first arrow missed completely. The second struck the water. The third landed somewhere in the reeds. Hours passed. Gradually, something changed. The archer stopped thinking about winning. He stopped calculating glory. He stopped imagining the crowd that would one day watch him. His attention returned to the present, the sound of flowing water, the rhythm of his breath, the weight of the bowstring against his fingers. When the next arrow flew, it pierced the drifting bowl effortlessly. The hermit smiled. "You did not become more skilled," he said. "You simply stopped shooting at tomorrow." How often do you do the opposite? You begin exercising, but your mind measures the body you hope to have 6 months from now. You begin learning a language, but You compare yourself to someone already fluent. You begin writing, painting, building, or dreaming. Yet every small step feels invisible because you are staring at the mountain instead of the path beneath your feet. The future becomes so enormous that today appears meaningless. And then anxiety quietly enters through that doorway. People often believe anxiety comes from having too much to do. Sometimes it comes from trying to live inside time that has not happened yet. Look at the bamboo growing along the riverbank. It does not stretch itself taller overnight. Its roots deepen in darkness long before anyone notices its height. For years, almost nothing seems to change above the earth. If you judged its progress by appearances alone, you would call it stagnant. But beneath the soil, an invisible architecture is forming. Your own life contains many unseen roots, conversations that shape your character, books that quietly rearrange your thinking, ordinary mornings that teach resilience, lonely evenings that deepen compassion. None of these announce themselves as transformation, yet they become the foundation for everything that later appears effortless. The problem is that the modern world celebrates blossoms while ignoring roots. You see someone standing confidently on a stage. You rarely witness the thousand silent mornings that made that confidence possible. You see the finished painting, not the discarded sketches, the flourishing tree, not the patient years beneath the ground. Comparison is therefore a conversation between your hidden roots and someone else's visible branches. It can never be fair. A flock of cranes crosses the night sky above the river. Their formation shifts constantly. No bird fights to remain in front forever. When the leader grows tired, another naturally moves ahead. The journey continues because each bird understands something remarkable. Progress does not require permanent leadership. It requires shared rhythm. Human beings often forget rhythm. We become obsessed with speed. There is a small clockmaker who lives alone in a quiet mountain village. Every winter, travelers bring him broken watches. Some have stopped completely. Others run too fast. The youngest apprentice once asked him which watch was the easiest to repair. The old clockmaker answered, "The broken one." The apprentice looked confused. "What about the one that runs too fast?" The old man sighed. "That is the dangerous one. Everyone believes it is working." Perhaps your own life has sometimes become that fast clock. From the outside, everything appears productive. Your calendar is full. Your ambitions are admirable. You answer every message. You chase every opportunity. Yet inside, your heart has lost its natural rhythm. You wake already exhausted. You rest without feeling restored. You accomplish much but inhabit very little. The clock is moving. Time is not. The fire cracks softly beside you. Its sparks rise into the darkness, disappearing among the stars. The old voice continues. When did you begin believing that every delay was a failure? It is such a strange belief. A seed delayed is called winter. A flower delayed is called spring. A river delayed is called snow. Nature gives different names to different timings. Only humans call every delay a problem. Think back to your own life. There were moments you desperately wanted something, a particular job, a certain person, a city that seemed like salvation. When those doors closed, it felt unbearable. Months or years later, many of those same disappointments quietly became protection. The relationship that would have broken you, the opportunity that would have trapped you, the success that arrived before you were ready to carry it. Looking backward, wisdom often appears obvious. Looking forward, it disguises itself as uncertainty. This is why waiting feels so painful. You are asked to trust without possessing the map. A fisherman understood this better than most. Every dawn, he pushed his small wooden boat into the mist. Some mornings, the nets returned overflowing with silver fish. Other mornings, they came back almost empty. A young visitor asked him how he avoided frustration. The fisherman laughed gently. "I never measure the river by one morning." He untangled his net carefully before speaking again. If I become arrogant after abundance, I suffer. If I become hopeless after scarcity, I suffer. The river changes every day. My work is simply to meet it. There is extraordinary freedom hidden inside those words. Meet the day, not dominate it. Meet your work, not your fantasy of where it should already lead. Meet the conversation, not the ending you have secretly written. Anxiety grows strongest whenever reality refuses to follow the script your mind prepared. The script is always detailed. You imagine exactly how someone should respond, how quickly success should arrive, how healing should feel, how happiness should look. Reality almost never memorizes your lines, and so disappointment becomes repetitive, not because life is cruel, but because expectation is inflexible. Clouds drift slowly across the moon. For a few moments, the valley grows darker. You notice how quickly your mind wants the moon to return. It is almost amusing. Even beauty becomes something you try to preserve. Yet moments later, the clouds pass naturally, without negotiation, without your assistance. There are seasons when your own clarity disappears the same way. You mistake temporary clouds for permanent night. You conclude that because joy has become hidden, it has vanished entirely. The moon would disagree. Its fullness never depended upon your ability to see it. Perhaps peace is sometimes like that. Not absent, simply obscured. The old philosophers loved empty spaces. They admired the hollow center of a bowl because it was the emptiness that made the bowl useful. They admired windows because of the space they framed rather than the wood surrounding them. Waiting can become such an empty space. You may see it as meaningless, but it may quietly become the place where your life becomes capable of receiving what constant striving cannot hold. A violin string pulled too loosely makes no music. Pulled too tightly, it snaps. Harmony lies somewhere between collapse and tension. So does the human heart. You were never meant to live endlessly relaxed, nor endlessly strained. Wisdom is learning the subtle art of returning to balance again and again. Not once, daily. The river is beginning to glow with the first hint of distant dawn, not sunlight. Only the faint promise that morning exists beyond the mountains. You realize something beautiful. The night never fought to become morning. It simply continued being night until its time was complete. Perhaps your own transformation asks for the same patience. Not dramatic reinvention, faithful continuation. The old voice grows quieter. One day, it says, you will discover that the greatest source of exhaustion was never the work itself. It was carrying tomorrow while walking through today. The embers fade into a warm crimson glow. Birds have not begun singing yet. The world remains suspended between darkness and light. And in that delicate silence, another question begins to rise like mist from the water. If waiting creates so much suffering, why do you spend so much energy trying to control what has never truly belonged to you? The river continues flowing, as though it has been preparing its answer all along. Before the birds greet the morning, there is a moment when the world seems to hold its breath. The fire has almost disappeared. Only a few glowing embers remain beneath the ash, breathing softly like the heart of the earth itself. Mist rises from the river in long silver ribbons. The mountains stand perfectly still, and you begin to notice something that has always been there. The river never asks permission to flow. It does not consult the stones before turning. It does not argue with the fallen branches resting in its path. It simply continues. The old voice speaks quietly. Tell me, what is it that you are trying so hard to control? The question feels uncomfortable, because the answer is not one thing. It is everything. You try to control how people see you. You try to control how quickly your career unfolds. You try to control whether someone loves you, stays with you, understands you, forgives you. You try to control your future, your reputation, your health, your happiness, even your own thoughts, especially your own thoughts. Yet have you ever noticed what happens the moment you command yourself to stop thinking? The thoughts multiply, like frightened birds suddenly filling the sky. Control has a strange habit. The tighter you hold it, the more fragile everything becomes. The king who feared the wind long ago, there was said to be a king whose greatest enemy was not another kingdom. It was uncertainty. He wanted a world where nothing unexpected could happen. He ordered walls built around every village. He planted identical trees along every road so the landscape would appear perfectly symmetrical. He punished weather forecasters whenever rain arrived unexpectedly, as though clouds obeyed human law. His palace became magnificent. Its gardens were flawless. Every flower bloomed in measured rows. Every servant moved according to precise schedules. Visitors admired its perfection. But no birds nested there. The trees produced almost no fruit. Butterflies rarely appeared. The gardeners eventually discovered why. In removing everything unpredictable, the king had also removed life itself. The wild bees preferred imperfect fields. The birds preferred uneven forests. Even flowers bloomed more freely beyond the palace walls. One evening, an elderly gardener approached the king carrying 2 branches. One came from the royal garden, perfectly straight, perfectly polished, completely lifeless. The other had grown beside a mountain stream, shape twisted in impossible directions. Its bark carried scars. Tiny leaves trembled in the evening breeze. The gardener asked only one question: which branch would you rather become? The king never answered, perhaps because he already knew. Many people live inside invisible palaces. Everything is organized. Everything is optimized. Every hour has a purpose. Every conversation has an outcome. Every relationship becomes a negotiation between expectation and disappointment. From the outside, life appears successful. Inside, something essential stops singing. Not because discipline is wrong, because life refuses to become a machine. Your invisible steering wheel, imagine sitting inside a boat floating across a lake covered in morning fog. You cannot see the opposite shore. Your hands grip the steering oar tightly. You believe that if you simply concentrate hard enough, you can command the lake itself. But beneath the surface, currents move silently. Wind changes direction. Mist rises and disappears without consulting your plans. Your effort matters. The illusion is believing it is the only thing that matters. This is where suffering often begins, not with action, with ownership. You begin believing that every outcome belongs entirely to you. If someone leaves, you assume you failed. If success arrives late, you assume you are broken. If life changes direction, you believe you have lost control. But did you ever truly possess it? A sailor can adjust the sail. He cannot negotiate with the wind. A farmer can prepare the soil. He cannot command spring. A musician can practice faithfully. She cannot force inspiration to appear at sunrise. Wisdom begins when effort and surrender stop fighting each other. The puppet strings. There was once a famous puppet maker who created figures so graceful that audiences often forgot they were made of wood. One curious child asked him after a performance, "How do they move so beautifully?" The old craftsman smiled. "They do not." Child looked confused. "It is the strings." The puppet maker gently lifted one of the marionettes. Without the strings, it collapsed into stillness. Then he did something surprising. He cut them. The puppet fell silently onto the table. "For years," he whispered, "people think freedom means controlling every string." He looked toward the open window where leaves danced in the wind. But perhaps freedom begins when you discover which strings were never yours. As you grow older, invisible strings become easier to see. The need to impress everyone, the fear of disappointing your parents, the desire to appear constantly successful, the habit of comparing your beginning to another person's middle. Many of these forces guide your decisions without permission. You mistake obedience for choice. Lao Tzu suggested something radical, not that you abandon responsibility, but that you examine the difference between natural movement and compulsive movement. One feels like breathing, the other feels like drowning while pretending to swim. Why the mind loves certainty? Your mind is not evil, it is protective. Thousands of years ago, uncertainty often meant danger. A rustle in the grass could hide a predator. A changing season could threaten survival. The human brain learned to predict, to prepare, to imagine. This gift helped civilizations grow. It also created a modern paradox. Now the same imagination invents dangers long before they arrive. You rehearse arguments. You predict rejection. You prepare for disasters that never happen. The mind believes it is protecting you. The heart quietly becomes exhausted. Notice how often your suffering begins with two simple words. What if? What if I fail? What if they judge me? What if I'm too late? What if I never become enough? These questions appear wise because they sound responsible, yet they almost always travel in one direction, toward fear. Rarely do you ask, what if this becomes beautiful? What if I am already growing? What if the delay is protecting me? The imagination is powerful. The question is not whether you use it. The question is which future you repeatedly practice. The falcon in the sky. A young falcon once became terrified of falling. Each time it opened its wings, it looked downward instead of upward. Its flight became awkward, short, uncertain. Watching from a nearby cliff, an old eagle finally called out, "You are studying the wrong direction." The falcon protested, "But the ground is where I might fall." The eagle lifted effortlessly into the morning wind. "Yes," he replied, "but the sky is where you fly." Your attention becomes the landscape of your experience. This does not mean ignoring difficulty. It means recognizing that constant attention to danger eventually becomes its own prison. Where attention rests, life quietly grows. If you water weeds every day, they flourish beautifully. The garden never blames the soil. Leaves in the current, the mist begins thinning. A few golden leaves drift onto the river. You watch them disappear around a bend. None resist. None try to float backward. Suddenly, the old voice asks another question. Why do you believe your life should move in only one direction? Think of your own journey. How many times has the path changed unexpectedly? A friendship ended. A career shifted. A dream dissolved. At the time, each felt like interruption. Looking back, many became redirection. Rivers rarely travel in straight lines, yet they almost always reach the sea. Curves are not mistakes. They are the way water moves through reality. Perhaps your detours deserve more respect than your plans. The weight of holding everything. An old monk carried water from the mountain every morning using 2 clay jars suspended from a wooden pole. One jar was perfect. The other had a long crack running down its side. The cracked jar apologized constantly. "I lose half the water before we reach home." The monk smiled but said nothing. After many months, he invited the jar to look behind them. Along the path, hundreds of wildflowers bloomed brilliantly. "The perfect jar watered my house," he said. "You watered the road." Control would have thrown the cracked jar away. Wisdom noticed the flowers. You have cracks too, moments you regret, mistakes that still visit your memory at night. Versions of yourself you wish had spoken differently, loved differently, stayed longer, left sooner. The mind wants to rewrite the past because it confuses memory with control. But memory is a mirror, not a doorway. No amount of regret changes yesterday. It only borrows strength from today. The empty hands. The old philosopher reaches toward the fading fire. He opens his palm. There is nothing inside it. "This," he says, "is how you meet life. Not empty because you own nothing, empty because you cling to nothing." There is profound strength in an open hand. A closed fist can strike. It cannot receive. A heart obsessed with control eventually loses its ability to notice surprise. Yet surprise is how many of life's greatest gifts arrive. Unexpected friendship, accidental discovery, love found in ordinary places, a conversation that changes everything. None appear on carefully designed schedules. They arrive like rain over quiet mountains, uninvited, necessary, beautiful. The first light across the valley, dawn, finally begins. Not dramatically. The eastern sky simply becomes a softer shade of blue. Birds wake one by one. The bamboo glows with gentle morning light. You realize the sunrise has been happening for several minutes before you noticed it. It did not ask for your approval. It did not wait until you were ready. It simply arrived. The old voice stands. Its robes move gently with the breeze. For most of your life, it says, you believed peace would come after control. He looks toward the river. But the river has been teaching another lesson. It is not control that creates peace. It is harmony. The word lingers in the cool morning air. Harmony, not passivity, not surrendering your dreams, not abandoning effort, something far more subtle, moving with the shape of reality instead of constantly colliding against it. The sun slowly lifts above the distant mountains. Golden light spills across the water. The river suddenly becomes brilliant. And as you watch its effortless movement, another chapter quietly begins to reveal itself. For if control is an illusion, then perhaps the greatest teacher has been flowing beside you all along. The sun has risen, but the valley is still quiet. Morning arrives gently in the mountains. Golden light touches the highest peaks first, then slowly descends toward the river as though the earth is waking one breath at a time. The mist dissolves without resistance. It does not fight the sunlight. It simply becomes something else. You remain beside the water. For hours, the river has been your companion. It has spoken without words. It has answered questions without offering explanations. The old philosopher kneels near the bank and lets his fingers touch the current. This, he says softly, was one of Lao Tzu's greatest teachers. Not the mountain, not the emperor, not the temple, water. At first, it seems almost disappointing. How could something so ordinary contain wisdom powerful enough to outlive kingdoms? You watch the current slide around smooth stones. It never hesitates. It never complains. And then you begin to notice something remarkable. The river is always moving forward, but it almost never travels in a straight line. Perhaps that is why your own life feels confusing. You were taught that progress should look like an arrow, direct, efficient, predictable. School follows college. College leads to work. Work becomes success. Success becomes happiness. A perfectly straight line. But nature has never drawn with rulers. The roots beneath the forest twist through darkness. Lightning bends across the sky. Birds migrate in enormous circles. Even galaxies spiral. Why then do you expect your own journey to unfold without curves? The philosopher picks up a small pebble and tosses it into the water. Concentric circles spread outward. They disappear, he says, but nothing is lost. The ripples vanish from sight, yet the river has changed forever. So have you. Every conversation you believed was insignificant. Every morning walk. Every failure that quietly humbled you. Every goodbye you never wanted. They continue moving through your character long after the moment itself has disappeared. The world often mistakes visible movement for real transformation. Water reminds you otherwise. Its greatest work happens silently. There is an old canyon hidden beyond these mountains. Travelers journey there to admire walls of stone rising hundreds of meters into the sky. The cliffs look eternal, unbreakable, as though no force could possibly reshape them. Yet the canyon was carved by a river, not in one violent season, but through countless gentle ones, drop after drop. Year after year, century after century, the hardest stone surrendered not to power but to persistence. This is difficult for impatient hearts. You want dramatic mornings. Life often changes through ordinary afternoons. You imagine becoming wiser after one extraordinary revelation. Instead, wisdom usually arrives disguised as repetition. Making your bed, keeping your promise, returning after disappointment, choosing kindness when nobody notices. These are drops of water. Individually, they seem meaningless. Together, they carve canyons. The philosopher smiles as if reading your thoughts. You keep asking, he says, when will I become the person I want to be? He gestures toward the river. The river never asks when it will reach the sea. It simply flows. For a long time, you believed peace belonged somewhere ahead, a destination, a reward for enough effort. But what if peace behaves more like water, not something waiting at the end, something practiced in the movement itself? A young musician once visited a famous master. "I want to play beautifully," she said. The master handed her an empty cup and began pouring tea. The tea reached the rim. Then it overflowed, it spilled across the table. The student jumped to stop him. "It's full." The old master nodded. "So are you." She looked confused. "You are full of the audience," he continued. "Full of applause. Full of fear. Full of becoming extraordinary." He emptied the cup. Again he poured. This time the tea settled perfectly. "Music," he whispered, "flows into empty places. Water always seeks the lowest point. That is why Lao Tzu admired it, not because it is weak, because it never competes for the highest position. It nourishes valleys instead of demanding mountaintops. Human beings often chase elevation, higher status, higher income, higher recognition. Water chooses usefulness over importance. And somehow, everything depends upon it. Think of the people who changed your life most deeply. Perhaps it was not the loudest voice, not the wealthiest person, not the one everyone admired. Maybe it was a teacher who listened, a grandmother who cooked without asking for gratitude, a friend who sat beside you during your darkest evening and said almost nothing. Like water, their strength appeared gentle. The philosopher stands and begins walking along the riverbank. You follow. The path is uneven. Wild grass brushes against your legs. Birdsong fills the air. After several minutes, you reach a place where the river suddenly narrows between two enormous rocks. The current becomes fierce. Foam crashes against stone. The noise is overwhelming. "Look carefully," the philosopher says. You expect him to point toward the violence. Instead, he points beyond it. Just a few meters later, the river becomes calm again. The turbulence was temporary. Its nature was not. How often do you mistake a difficult season for your permanent identity? You say, "I'm anxious. I'm lost. I'm broken." As though the rushing water between the rocks is the entire river, but you have been many people already: a frightened child, a hopeful teenager, an uncertain adult, a grieving friend, a joyful lover. Each version felt permanent while you lived it. Each eventually flowed into another. The river never apologizes for changing its shape. Neither should you. Farther ahead, an old willow leans over the water. Its branches almost touch the surface. Wind begins moving through the valley. The willow bends gracefully. Nearby, a dead tree stands rigid. Its trunk no longer moves at all. The philosopher asks quietly which one looks stronger. Your eyes instinctively choose the thicker trunk. Then another gust arrives. The willow dances. The dead tree cracks. A long branch falls heavily onto the shore. Rigidity often looks powerful, until life begins to blow. Many people confuse stubbornness with strength. They refuse to change careers they no longer love. They refuse to forgive. They refuse to admit they are afraid. They call it resilience. Sometimes it is only fear wearing armor. Water teaches another kind of courage. The courage to adapt without losing your essence. Pour water into a bowl, it becomes the bowl. Pour it into a river, it joins the river. Freeze it, it becomes ice. Heat it, it becomes vapor. Its form changes endlessly. Its nature remains unchanged. Perhaps maturity is exactly that, not becoming someone else. Learning how to remain yourself in changing circumstances. The philosopher stops beneath the willow. From his sleeve, he removes a small wooden flute. He plays only 4 notes. The melody is almost unbearably simple. Then he lowers the instrument. "Did you hear the silence?" he asks. You realize the beauty was not only in the notes, it lived between them. Water understands emptiness. A river flows because there is space for it to flow. Your life also needs empty places, moments without productivity, walks without podcasts, meals without scrolling. Even conversations need pauses or words lose their meaning. Yet you fill every silence because stillness makes you uncomfortable. Why? Because silence introduces you to yourself. The river has no fear of quiet, it sings without speaking. By midday, sunlight sparkles across the surface like thousands of tiny mirrors. The philosopher sits upon a flat stone. There is another lesson, he says. The river never drinks its own water. The sentence sounds strange. He continues. It gives everything away. It nourishes forests it will never see, fields it will never harvest, cities it will never inhabit, clouds lifted into the sky. Rain returns it to the mountains. Its generosity creates its continuity. Perhaps this is why grasping feels so exhausting. You believe keeping everything will make you secure. Keeping money, keeping praise, keeping certainty, keeping people exactly as they are. But rivers survive by flowing, not by storing. Love works similarly. The more tightly you imprison it, the more quickly it disappears. Respect cannot be demanded, trust cannot be forced, friendship cannot be scheduled into permanence. The deepest relationships breathe like rivers. They move, they evolve, they make room. An elderly woman lived alone near the edge of the valley. Every afternoon, she carried buckets of water from the river to a small garden behind her cottage. A traveler once asked why she worked so faithfully. "You're too old to plant trees whose shade you'll never enjoy." She smiled without stopping. "My grandfather planted the walnut tree that shelters this house." She pointed toward its enormous branches. "He never sat beneath it either." The traveler fell silent. Some actions belong to the future more than the present. Water never asks who deserves its kindness. It simply nourishes. You think of your own life. How much energy has been spent proving yourself, winning arguments, seeking recognition, trying to appear important? Meanwhile, the people who leave the deepest mark often move quietly through the world, like rivers, useful, steady, unforgettable. The afternoon light begins softening. Long shadows stretch across the valley. The philosopher rises once more. He looks downstream where the river disappears between distant hills. "People believe the river is searching for the sea," he says. He smiles gently. But from the very first drop of snow upon the mountain, it was already on its way. You suddenly understand. The sea was never pulling the river through anxiety. The river reached it by faithfully becoming itself at every moment along the journey. Not rushing, not stopping, not comparing its path to another stream, just flowing. The wind carries the scent of pine through the valley. The river continues its endless song. And as the sunlight begins its slow descent toward evening, another lesson waits quietly among the bamboo. A lesson not about flowing around obstacles, but about surviving the storms that inevitably arrive. For even water, gentle as it is, cannot teach resilience alone. Sometimes you must learn from the bamboo. By the time the sun begins its descent, the valley has changed once again. The bright certainty of morning has softened into warm afternoon light. Long shadows stretch across the river, and the bamboo grove beyond the water glows like polished jade. Every stalk moves gently in the wind, creating a sound so delicate it resembles whispered conversation. The philosopher stands without speaking. He begins walking toward the grove. You follow the narrow path, leaving the river behind for the first time since dawn. The air becomes cooler beneath the bamboo canopy. Light filters through thousands of slender leaves, falling onto the earth in moving patterns that never repeat. Then he asks a question. Which tree survives the strongest storm? You think of the great oak, the ancient cedar, the towering pine standing proudly against the mountain. The philosopher shakes his head. Come, Deep inside the grove stands a single broken cedar. Its trunk is enormous, yet it lies across the forest floor, split almost perfectly in half. Moss has already begun growing over its bark. Ferns rise through the cracks as though the forest is quietly transforming death into new life. Beside it, dozens of bamboo stalks stand completely unharmed, thin, flexible, unremarkable. The philosopher places his hand upon the fallen cedar. It believed strength meant refusing to bend. Then he touches the bamboo. This one understood another language. A strong wind passes through the grove. The bamboo bows together like respectful listeners. None resist. None attempt to remain perfectly upright. When the wind disappears, they return to stillness as though nothing had happened. Perhaps resilience has never meant becoming unbreakable. Perhaps it means becoming difficult to break. For much of your life, you have probably admired people who seemed invincible, those who never cried, never doubted, never appeared vulnerable. You thought wisdom looked like permanent confidence. But mountains teach something different. Even cliffs crack, even glaciers melt, even ancient trees fall. Nature does not preserve itself through hardness alone. It survives through adaptation. There was once a young soldier who returned home after many years of war. His village celebrated his courage. Children followed him through the streets. People admired the scars upon his arms. Everyone believed he was the strongest man they had ever known. Yet each night he walked alone into the bamboo forest. An elderly woman who gathered herbs often saw him sitting silently beneath the trees. One evening she approached. "You survived the battlefield," she said. "Why do you still come here?" The soldier looked at the bamboo moving in the moonlight. "In battle," he whispered, "I learned how to resist." He paused for a long time. "But no one taught me how to soften." The old woman smiled gently. "Then the bamboo will. Many people know how to endure. Few know how to recover. There is an important difference. Endurance carries you through the storm. Recovery teaches you how to bloom afterward. The modern world praises endurance endlessly. Keep pushing, keep producing, keep performing, keep smiling. Even exhaustion becomes something to admire. But imagine asking a field of wheat to remain standing forever. After harvest, it must rest. The soil must breathe. Winter must arrive. Rest is not the opposite of growth. It is one of its seasons. The philosopher kneels beside a young bamboo shoot no taller than your knee. "You see this?" he asks. You nod. "It will become taller than the cedar." "That seems impossible. The shoot looks fragile enough to snap beneath your fingertips. But first," he continues, "it spends years growing downward." Again, nature speaks through roots. Again, the invisible comes before the visible. How many times have you mistaken slow progress for no progress? You learn a skill for months without recognition. You exercise without dramatic change. You meditate without feeling peaceful. You write pages that nobody reads. Quietly, roots are forming. The tragedy is that many people abandon the forest just before the roots become strong enough to lift the tree. A potter lived near the western mountains. His bowls were famous throughout neighboring villages, not because they were flawless, but because each carried a unique flowing pattern beneath its glaze. One apprentice desperately tried to imitate them. He failed repeatedly. His bowls cracked inside the kiln. Frustrated, he finally asked his teacher for the secret. The old potter handed him a perfectly smooth bowl. "Break it." The apprentice froze. "It's beautiful. Break it." Reluctantly, he dropped it onto the stone floor. The bowl shattered into dozens of pieces. The master gathered them carefully. Then he mixed the broken clay back into fresh earth. Weeks later, that same clay became another bowl, stronger, richer, more beautiful than before. Nothing in nature, the potter said, is ashamed of becoming material for another beginning. You carry broken pieces too, dreams that never happened, relationships that ended, versions of yourself that collapsed unexpectedly. You often see them as evidence of failure. Nature sees them as compost. Forests do not mourn every fallen leaf. They transform it into fertile ground. Perhaps healing is less about repairing the old self than nourishing the next one. The wind grows stronger. Leaves swirl through the grove like small birds. You notice that every bamboo stalk moves together. No single stem fights the wind alone. Their roots are connected beneath the earth. Though each appears separate, the underground network shares strength across the entire grove. The philosopher notices your expression. Loneliness, he says quietly, is one of the greatest illusions. You think of crowded cities where thousands live side by side yet feel unseen. You think of evenings spent surrounded by people while feeling strangely distant. Connection has little to do with proximity. The bamboo teaches another lesson. Its strength comes from unseen relationships. You were never meant to carry every burden alone. Not because dependence is weakness, because even forests grow through community. There is an old tradition among mountain villagers. Whenever someone builds a new house, the entire village arrives before sunrise. One person brings wood, another carries stone, children gather water, the oldest people prepare food. By evening, the foundation is finished. No family keeps a record of who contributed more, because everyone knows that one day they will stand on the other side of the gift. Life becomes lighter when it stops behaving like a transaction. You do not always need to earn kindness. Sometimes you simply receive it. Sometimes you offer it, like rain. The philosopher breaks off a single dry bamboo leaf and places it into your hand. It has completed its work. The leaf is pale gold, weightless. The tree does not cling to it, it lets go naturally. Why is letting go so difficult for humans? Not because we love deeply, because we often confuse love with possession. You try to preserve moments that were only meant to be experienced. Childhood, youth, certain friendships, certain places, certain versions of yourself. But rivers flow, seasons change, leaves fall. The bamboo does not call autumn a tragedy, it calls it preparation. As evening approaches, dark clouds begin gathering beyond the mountains. The air becomes unusually still. Birdsong fades. Even the bamboo seems to pause. The philosopher looks toward the horizon. A storm is coming. Within minutes, thunder rolls across the valley. Rain begins suddenly, heavy, cold. The wind rushes through the grove with astonishing force. The bamboo bends lower than you thought possible. Some nearly touch the ground. The broken cedar remains exactly where it fell years ago, a silent reminder of another storm long forgotten. You instinctively search for shelter. The philosopher remains calm. He simply stands among the bamboo. Do not fight it, he says. The rain soaks your clothes. Wind pushes against your body. For several minutes, everything feels chaotic. Then something remarkable happens. You stop resisting. Instead of leaning against the wind, you move with it. Instead of fearing the rain, you hear its rhythm striking thousands of leaves. The storm has not become gentler, you have. Eventually, as every storm does, it passes. The clouds drift eastward. Drops of water fall from the bamboo in slow, shining beads. Sunlight breaks through one final opening in the sky, covering the wet forest in gold. Nothing looks destroyed. In fact, everything appears more alive. The philosopher smiles. This is Wu Wei. Not doing nothing, not surrendering to defeat, but refusing the unnecessary struggle that comes from opposing reality itself. The bamboo did not defeat the storm. It survived because it never tried to. You stand quietly as evening settles over the valley. The river below reflects the first colors of sunset. A single crane flies across the glowing sky, and somewhere within you, another rigid branch has begun to soften. For tomorrow's journey is not about surviving storms. It is about returning again and again to the only place where life has ever truly existed, today. The storm has passed. Its thunder has already become memory. Drops of rain still cling to the bamboo leaves, and every so often one releases itself, falling into the soft earth below. The forest smells different now, richer, fresher, as though the rain did not merely wash the valley, it revealed it. You and the philosopher begin walking back toward the river. The path is familiar, yet it feels new. Perhaps every place becomes new after a storm, or perhaps it is the one who walks through it who has changed. The river appears again between the trees, carrying fragments of orange sky upon its surface. It flows exactly as it did yesterday, exactly as it did this morning, and yet it is not the same water. The philosopher sits upon the same flat stone where you rested at dawn. So, he asks quietly, "Where is your life?" You almost answer with a place, a city, a future home, a dream still waiting to happen. But the question is deeper than geography. Where is your life? For years, you answered without realizing it. My life will begin after I earn enough, after I find the right person, after I become confident, after I stop feeling afraid. The sentence always pointed away from the present. Tomorrow became a beautiful country you could never immigrate to. Today became nothing more than a waiting room. The philosopher picks up a fallen maple leaf and places it on the river. Watch. The leaf begins drifting downstream. It never pauses to ask where the ocean is. It simply meets each moment of the current. A bend, a stone, a quiet pool, a faster stream. Nothing is rejected. Nothing is hurried. You suddenly remember something from childhood. There were afternoons that seemed endless. You could spend an hour watching ants carry crumbs across a sidewalk. You could lie beneath a tree and invent shapes inside passing clouds. Summer evenings felt almost eternal because you were rarely asking what came next. Somewhere along the journey into adulthood, time changed. Not because clocks became faster, because attention became divided. You began eating while answering messages, walking while worrying, listening while preparing your reply, resting while feeling guilty about resting. Your body remained in one place. Your mind became a traveler with no home. The philosopher notices the sadness crossing your face. You miss childhood, he says. You nod. He smiles gently. No, you miss presence. The distinction is important. Children are not happy because they are young. They are often happy because they inhabit the moment completely. When they laugh, they laugh. When they cry, they cry. When they watch rain, they simply watch rain. They do not constantly negotiate with another version of time. A wandering monk once visited a wealthy merchant whose house contained everything money could purchase. Rare paintings covered the walls. Silk curtains moved softly in the breeze. The finest tea filled porcelain cups. Yet the merchant confessed, "I have everything I wanted, but I enjoy almost nothing." The monk asked for permission to stay one day. The merchant agreed. At sunrise, the monk swept the garden, slowly. At breakfast, he drank tea without speaking. In the afternoon, he repaired a cracked fence with complete attention. Before leaving, the merchant asked, "What wisdom have you brought me?" The monk looked surprised. "I brought none. I only did one thing at a time." The merchant stood silent. He realized his body had lived inside a beautiful house for years. His attention had lived somewhere else. There is a quiet violence in constantly abandoning the present, not dramatic, almost invisible. You rush through breakfast to begin work. You rush through work to reach evening. You rush through evening waiting for the weekend. Then Sunday becomes anxious because Monday is approaching. Entire weeks disappear inside preparation for another week. The philosopher draws a circle in the sand beside the river. "This," he says, "is today." Then he begins drawing lines extending outward in every direction. These are your thoughts. Regret reaches backward, fear reaches forward, comparison reaches sideways, ambition climbs upward, shame digs downward. Soon the original circle becomes almost hidden beneath the lines. He brushes the sand smooth with one movement. Again, only the circle remains. "Return," he whispers, "not once, again and again." Perhaps this is the simplest definition of wisdom, not having a perfectly peaceful mind, remembering how to come home when it wanders. A woman lived beside a mountain lake where the water reflected the sky with extraordinary clarity. Travelers often visited hoping to see the famous reflection. One windy afternoon, a young painter became disappointed. "The lake is ruined," he complained. "The surface keeps moving." The old woman laughed softly. "Wait." They sat without speaking. Gradually, the wind faded. The water became still. Mountains appeared perfectly upon its surface. "The reflection," she said, "was never gone, only disturbed." Your own heart resembles that lake. Peace is not always absent. Sometimes it is simply hidden beneath restless thought. You do not create clarity by attacking the water. You allow the wind to settle. Evening birds begin gathering along the reeds. Their calls echo gently across the valley. The philosopher closes his eyes. You notice he is listening, not searching. Listening. There is a difference. Searching assumes something important is missing. Listening trusts that something important is already here. Modern life teaches searching endlessly. A better phone, a better apartment, a better version of yourself. Searching has its place. It builds bridges, discovers medicine, explores stars. But a heart that only knows searching eventually forgets how to recognize arrival. How many prayers have already been answered without celebration? The friend who stayed, the illness that healed, the ordinary morning when everyone you love quietly woke beneath the same roof. Miracles often wear ordinary clothes. That is why they go unnoticed. The philosopher begins preparing tea over a small kettle suspended above fresh firewood. You watch each movement. He pours water, waits, adds leaves, waits again. The fragrance slowly rises into the evening air. Nothing is rushed. Finally, he hands you a cup. It is warm against your palms. Neither of you drinks immediately. "You know," he says, "tea has a lesson." You smile. Everything seems to have a lesson. He laughs quietly. "Yes." He lifts the cup. "If I hurry this moment," he drinks too quickly, pretending to burn his tongue. You both laugh. "The tea disappears," he says. "If I postpone drinking," he places the cup beside him. "It grows cold." Then he takes one slow sip. "This is enough." How much of life resembles warm tea? Love enjoyed too late. Sunsets photographed instead of watched. Parents called tomorrow instead of today. The book you always meant to read. The walk you always meant to take. Life rarely disappears dramatically. It cools. The sky above the valley has become lavender. The first evening star appears. The philosopher points upward. "Do you know why stars comfort people?" You think for a moment. "Because they are beautiful." "Yes," he says, "but also because they never hurry." Some of their light began traveling toward Earth long before you were born. Tonight it finally arrives. Imagine that. A journey lasting thousands of years, and still the stars are not late. Perhaps your own becoming is measured by a larger clock than the one hanging on your wall. You have been judging yourself against timelines borrowed from strangers. Someone married at 25. Someone became wealthy at 30. Someone published a book at 40. The bamboo never compares itself to the pine. Spring never apologizes for arriving after winter. Each season fulfills its own nature. Why have you denied yourself the same kindness? Darkness settles gently. The river now reflects only stars and firelight. The philosopher adds another piece of wood to the flames. Sparks rise into the night like tiny prayers. He speaks one final thought before silence. People ask how to live in the present. He watches the fire. They ask the wrong question. You wait. The question is, how often are you willing to return? Because tomorrow your mind will wander again. It will invent fears, revisit old conversations, measure your progress, compare your journey. That is not failure, that is weather. Wu Wei is not permanent serenity. It is the gentle practice of returning without violence, returning to your breath, returning to your work, returning to the person sitting across from you, returning to the meal in your hands, returning to the sound of rain against the window, returning to this single living moment, again and again and again. The fire burns steadily. The river continues its endless song. Above you, countless stars shine with patient light. And as the night deepens, the valley prepares for another lesson, not about today alone, but about the mysterious rhythm through which every life quietly unfolds. For even presence is only one season. The heart must still learn how to trust the seasons of becoming. Night slowly gives way to another dawn. The stars fade one by one, not because they have disappeared, but because a greater light is arriving. The valley wakes without announcement. Somewhere in the distance, a single bird begins to sing. Soon another answers, then another. Before long, the entire forest seems to remember the morning together. You and the philosopher sit in silence. Neither of you feels the need to speak. There is something comforting about sharing a sunrise with someone who does not hurry to explain it. After a long while, he looks toward the mountains. "Tell me," he asks, "which season is the most important?" You smile, it sounds like a child's riddle. "Spring." You guess, he shakes his head. "Autumn." Again, he smiles. Then he gestures toward the valley, where traces of every season seem to exist at once. Snow resting on distant peaks, green forests below, fallen leaves caught beside the river, and wildflowers blooming along the shore. The mountain refuses to choose, he says. So does life. For years, you believed growth meant constantly becoming more disciplined, more successful, more confident, more certain. But nature rarely grows in a straight upward direction. It grows in cycles. The seed disappears before the tree appears. The blossom falls before the fruit forms. The leaf dies before the soil becomes fertile again. Nothing in the living world is ashamed of having seasons. Only human beings apologize for them. Winter is not failure. There is a village beyond the northern ridge where winters last almost half the year. Snow covers every roof. The river slows beneath sheets of ice. Visitors often pity the villagers. "How lonely," they say, "how empty." The villagers simply smile because they know something outsiders do not. Winter is when tools are repaired, stories are told, children learn from grandparents, seeds are sorted beside warm fires. What looks empty is quietly preparing abundance. Think about the winters of your own life, the months after heartbreak, the year when nothing seemed to move, the lonely apartment, the job that taught patience more than passion. At the time, you called those periods wasted. Looking back, many became the quiet workshops where your character was rebuilt. Perhaps your greatest mistake was demanding blossoms during winter. The philosopher draws 4 circles in the sand. He writes, nothing inside them. Instead, he points to each one. Beginning, growth, harvest, rest. Then he brushes them away. Every day, he says, contains all 4. You do not need to wait for an entire year to honor your seasons. Some mornings are for beginning, some afternoons for growing, some evenings for gratitude, some nights for letting go. A balanced life is not one endless spring. It is learning when each season belongs. The orchard that bloomed too early, an old orchard, once became famous because one apple tree bloomed weeks before every other tree. Travelers admired it. The owner felt proud. "My tree is special," he would say. Then one final frost arrived. Every blossom died overnight. The neighboring trees remained bare, patient, silent. A month later, they bloomed safely. By autumn, the early tree carried almost no fruit. The patient trees bent beneath abundance. The orchard keeper learned a painful truth. Being early is not always being ready. How often have you mistaken timing for worth? You compare yourself with friends who seem ahead. Someone buys a home. Someone starts a family. Someone becomes successful before 30. Quietly, you conclude that your own season has failed. But forests do not bloom simultaneously. Cherry blossoms arrive before maple leaves. Sunflowers wait for deeper summer. Pines remain green through winter while other trees surrender every leaf. Different rhythms. equal belonging. Your timeline is not evidence. It is simply your climate. The gardener of empty pots in a quiet monastery lived an elderly gardener responsible for hundreds of clay pots. Visitors noticed something unusual. Nearly half the pots appeared empty. One young monk asked why he wasted so much space. The gardener handed him an empty pot. "Hold it." The monk did. "What do you feel?" "Nothing." The old man smiled. "Exactly." Weeks later, tiny green shoots emerged from the soil. Months later, fragrant jasmine overflowed the same pot. The gardener whispered, "People always abandon the pot during the invisible season. How many dreams have you abandoned because they looked empty? A language after 30 difficult lessons. A business after one quiet year. A book after 50 unread pages." The invisible season demands the deepest faith because it offers almost no evidence. Yet roots have never cared whether anyone applauds them. Becoming is often invisible clouds drift slowly across the valley. The philosopher watches them with remarkable attention. "Do you see them changing?" he asks. You stare for several moments. Almost nothing happens. Then suddenly you realize they have completely transformed. The change was continuous. Your attention was interrupted. Growth often feels exactly like this. Living inside it, you believe nothing is happening. Looking back, everything has changed. Consider the person you were 5 years ago. Your worries were different. Your dreams were different. Even your voice carried another kind of hope. Transformation did not arrive in one dramatic morning. It accumulated quietly through ordinary days. A conversation, a mistake, a book, a goodbye. Thousands of invisible brushstrokes created someone new. Stop demanding visible progress every evening. Some paintings reveal themselves only after countless layers have dried. The mountain path a traveler climbed the tallest mountain in the region. Halfway up, thick fog surrounded him. He became furious. "I cannot see the summit." An old shepherd passing with his sheep laughed gently. "Can you see the next step?" "Yes." "Then why are you asking the mountain for more?" The traveler continued climbing. Hours later, the fog dissolved naturally. The summit had been there the entire time. Your future often resembles that mountain. You keep demanding certainty about the peak. Life keeps offering only the next step, not because it is cruel, because clarity grows with movement. Waiting for perfect visibility usually becomes another way of remaining still. Wu Wei does not reject action. It rejects forced certainty. You walk. The path reveals itself. The tree that refused autumn there is an old tale told by mountain children. A proud tree loved its leaves more than anything else. When autumn arrived, every neighboring tree released its golden branches into the wind. Only one refused. It held every leaf with desperate strength. Winter came. Heavy snow settled upon the branches. The weight became unbearable. By spring, many limbs had broken. Meanwhile, the trees that had surrendered autumn grew fresh leaves effortlessly. The story was never about trees. It was about people, holding resentment, holding old identities, holding impossible expectations, holding the version of yourself that no longer fits who you are becoming. Letting go is not forgetting. It is making space. The forest cannot receive spring while clutching every autumn leaf. Neither can the heart. The quiet harvest as afternoon light fills the valley, the philosopher gathers wild berries growing beside the path. He places them into a woven basket. Not one bush carries fruit all year. The sweetness exists because the plant accepted every previous season. Rain, cold, wind, stillness. Nothing was unnecessary. You think about success differently now. Perhaps harvest is not the goal. Perhaps it is simply one season among many. If you live only for harvest, you will resent preparation. If you live only for spring, you will fear autumn. Wisdom enjoys the berry while remembering the snow that made it possible. Gratitude is seasonal memory. It remembers what abundance often forgets. The river never counts the days evening approaches once more. The valley glows with amber light. You return to the river where the journey began. The current looks exactly as it did on the first night, yet you know it is different water. The philosopher skips a smooth stone across the surface. It bounces 5 times before disappearing. The river never counts, he says. It never says, I have flowed for 1,000 years. I deserve the sea now. It simply continues. Perhaps your suffering has never come from the length of the journey. Perhaps it comes from constantly counting it. How much longer? When will it happen? Why not yet? These questions turn seasons into burdens. The bamboo never asks when it will become tall. The moon never asks when it will become full. The earth never rushes towards spring. Everything arrives through faithful rhythm, including you. The first stars begin appearing again above the mountains. The philosopher rises slowly. His face is peaceful, illuminated by the last light of day. You wanted your life to bloom immediately, he says, but the valley has been teaching something else. He looks across the forest where young saplings grow beside ancient trees, become like the seasons. Give yourself permission to begin. Give yourself patience to grow. Give yourself gratitude to harvest. And give yourself wisdom to rest. The river continues singing its endless song. The wind moves gently through the bamboo. Above you, the sky deepens into indigo. Only one lesson remains now. Not how to wait, not how to flow, not how to endure, but how to trust that everything truly meaningful arrives, not according to your urgency, but in its own time. The final night arrives so quietly that you almost miss it. There is no ceremony, no grand conclusion written across the sky. The valley simply settles into silence, just as it has done countless times before. The river continues its patient journey through the darkness. The bamboo sways gently beneath the stars. The mountains remain exactly where they have always been, asking for nothing and proving nothing. You sit beside the same fire where this journey began. Its flames are smaller now, steadier. The philosopher places one last piece of wood upon the embers. Sparks rise slowly into the night, disappearing among constellations whose light began traveling long before either of you existed. For a long time, neither of you speaks. It feels unnecessary. Some truths arrive only after language has become quiet. At last, the philosopher asks the same question that opened your journey. When will your real life begin? You smile, not because you have found a clever answer, because the question itself has changed. In the beginning, it felt heavy. Now it feels almost impossible. How could life begin somewhere else? It has been happening with every breath, with every sunrise beside this river, with every storm through the bamboo, with every cup of tea shared in silence. You realize something beautiful. You were never searching for another life. You were searching for permission to enter the one already unfolding. The philosopher nods as though he has heard your unspoken thought. Most people, he says softly, stand at the doorway of their own lives holding a key. They simply never believe it fits. A shooting star crosses the sky. It appears for only a heartbeat. Then the darkness becomes whole again. You do not wish it had lasted longer. Its briefness was part of its beauty. Perhaps this is the lesson hidden inside everything mortal. The cherry blossom, the evening rain, a child's laughter from another room, the final embrace before two friends part ways. Their value does not come from permanence. It comes from presence. For years, you feared that time was leaving you behind. You watched birthdays like closing doors. You compared your journey with strangers whose lives seemed perfectly timed. Some married earlier. Some became wealthy sooner. Some appeared fearless while you still wrestled with doubt. You believed life was a race because everyone around you kept announcing their position. But tonight, beneath these stars, the valley offers another image. Look upward. No constellation is late. The moon never apologizes for being crescent. Winter never envies spring. The river never competes with the mountain. Everything belongs because everything follows its own nature. The tragedy was never that your path looked different. It was believing it should have looked someone else's. There is one final story. An old watchmaker lived alone until the end of his life. People traveled from distant villages to repair clocks that had stopped working. One afternoon, a little girl asked him a question no adult had ever asked. "Which clock is your favorite?" The old man looked around his workshop. Hundreds of clocks surrounded him. Some were enormous, others small enough to fit inside a pocket. Each ticked with its own rhythm. He smiled. "The one in front of me." The girl laughed. "No, I mean the best one." He gently shook his head. "There is no best rhythm." He lifted a tiny wooden clock whose pendulum swung slowly. Then he pointed toward a tall grandfather clock beating much faster. "If I force this one to match the other," he said, "I destroy them both." Every clock kept perfect time by remaining faithful to its own design. The little girl never forgot those words. Neither should you. You have spent years adjusting your heartbeat to someone else's clock, measuring your worth against borrowed schedules, feeling ashamed of seasons that were never mistakes. But existence has never asked the bamboo to bloom like the rose. It has never asked the eagle to swim like the fish. It has never asked the river to stand still like the lake. Why have you asked impossible things from yourself? The fire has become a circle of glowing embers. The philosopher pours the last of the tea into 2 small cups. You drink slowly. The warmth settles into your chest. He looks toward the river. "Do you remember the beginning?" You do. You arrived carrying invisible luggage, regret over yesterday, fear of tomorrow, 1,000 unfinished conversations inside your mind. You thought peace was hidden somewhere beyond achievement. Now the river whispers another truth. Peace was never waiting downstream. It was flowing beside you every step. Wu Wei has often been translated as effortless action. Many misunderstand it. They imagine laziness, withdrawal, doing nothing. But the river has corrected that misunderstanding. Water is never idle. It travels mountains, carves canyons, nourishes forests, reaches oceans. Its effort is real. Its struggle is unnecessary. There is a profound difference. The flower does not strain to open. The dawn does not force itself across the horizon. A bird does not rehearse how to sing. Each fulfills its nature completely. Perhaps your deepest work is not becoming someone extraordinary. Perhaps it is removing everything that prevents your own nature from quietly appearing. The need to impress, the obsession with control, the fear of imperfect timing, the endless habit of postponing joy. One by one, they fall away like autumn leaves. Beneath them, something remarkably simple remains. You, not the version performing for the world, the one who notices rain, who finds comfort in rivers, who can sit beside another human being without needing to fill every silence, who understands that strength sometimes bends like bamboo, who trusts that roots grow before branches, who knows that storms pass. The eastern horizon begins to brighten. Another morning, you're last in the valley. Birds awaken gently. Mist rises from the river exactly as it did on the first day. The philosopher stands. There is no farewell speech. He simply begins walking toward the mountain path. After several steps, he pauses. Without turning around, he says one final sentence. Everything arrives on its own once you stop forcing it. Then he continues climbing until the morning mist slowly hides him from view. You remain beside the river alone, or perhaps, for the first time, not alone at all. The water keeps flowing. A bamboo leaf lands softly upon its surface and begins drifting toward the unseen sea. You do not wonder how long the journey will take. You do not worry whether it will arrive. You simply watch it move with quiet certainty. The sun rises above the mountains. Light fills the valley, and without any dramatic announcement, your ordinary life begins again. Only now, you know it was never waiting for tomorrow. It was always arriving in its own time.